Everyone. I'm really honored to introduce my friend Grace Kim, who's a wonderful friend of mine. And she has close ties with not only Japan and the United States, but also South Korea. So that's what I would like to ask about. And also, she's a great event planner and she's an entrepreneurial and artistic spirit. So I would like to ask about that too. Thank you so much for joining me, Grace.
Thank you so much for allowing me to join your podcast.
Okay, so without further ado, I just wanted to ask you about your upbringing, where you were born and raised, as well as your identity growing up.
Sure. So, to tell you first where I was born and raised. So, my parents are both Korean. They were born and raised in Korea. They got married and had my sister. And after that, my father decided to pursue his doctorate degree in the US at Ohio State University. So, I was born during that time, in Columbus, Ohio. We had spent about 3 years, or I have spent about 3 years in the US. And my father had, after graduating, he was able to get a job in Japan. So we moved as a family to Japan, first in Nara for 4 years and Chiba for 2 years. And after that, we moved to Korea once again for my dad's job. Lived there about a year, year and a half, and moved back to the US in early 2000s, and we've lived here in Northern Virginia for about 20 plus years now. But in between, there, after I had graduated from college, I did go to work in Japan for a year for a JET program.
What would you say your identity was growing up, and how has it changed over the years?
I was raised in a Korean household, so the fact I knew that I was Korean and my identity was also Korean, but when I was younger, especially when I was in elementary school, I would say, I don't think I was mature enough to have that realization or
Hmm.
have a set identity.
Hmm.
I blended in really well with my Japanese cohorts when I attended school in Japan.
Hmm.
My sister and I have an older sister. My sister and I both attended public schools and we picked up Japanese pretty quickly. So we didn't have any difficulties communicating with our classmates. So we got along fine with our peers.
Hmm.
And my sister and I both went by our Korean names. So the legal name that I have in the US is Grace Kim. I don't have my Korean name as the middle name. It's just Grace Kim.
Hmm.
There's so many Grace Kims in the area, by the way. One of the many. But
Hmm.
when we lived in Japan, we both went by a Korean name. My Korean name
Oh.
is Yun Young.
Hmm.
So we went by not Kim. Typically, Korean Kim would be written out in katakana Kimu,
Hmm.
but when we lived in Japan, we went by King, like Keaton.
Interesting.
Just different way of, yeah,
Yeah.
phonetically different way of writing it. I don't know why, but that's just we went by King, and then my name is Yoon Young, so my Korean name that I used in Japan was King Yoon Young, King Yoon Young. So yeah, when I was living in Japan, I would
Hmm.
say I knew I was Korean, but didn't have a very strong sense of identity
Hmm.
separating me from my Japanese peers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about your identity now? How do you, yeah, how do you feel?
Right. Okay. So now I would say I feel if someone asked me, I would say describe myself as a Korean American.
Okay.
So that shift has happened, I believe, after I have left Japan, we moved to Korea. And in Korea, ironically, I didn't, in Japan, I didn't experience any kind of bullying or
Hmm.
people picking on me because I was Korean, which is, I was very blessed to have people who are very open-minded,
Yeah.
although it was in a more rural area. Um, but as soon as I moved to Korea, I didn't speak, although I grew up in a Korean household. hearing Korean at home, because my parents spoke in Korean, but
Mm-hmm.
my output wasn't that good. I understood what was being said to me, but I wasn't be able to express myself very well in
Mm-hmm.
Korean. So when my sister and I both started attending school, again, public school in Korea, I wasn't able to speak that much Korean or do well in school at all. So because of that, people, especially just boys in the class, would like make fun of me, like, "Oh, you're Japanese." I'm like, "I'm not Japanese. I'm Korean,
Mm-hmm.
just like you guys." I think that was the moment where I felt alienated for the first time, which is again ironic given that I was a fully Korean person
Mm-hmm.
going to school with a fully Korean peers. But at that time, I would say I wasn't sure what my identity was
Mm-hmm.
in Korea. But after I had left, we have moved to the US. There are, as you may know, a lot of Korean population in the DMV area. I went to
Mm-hmm.
a school in Northern Virginia, and there were many fellow Korean FOBs, fresh off the boat students.
Mm-hmm.
So I have naturally just gravitated towards them
Mm-hmm.
as a way to kind of survive school. Like, oh, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not able to, again, in this case, communicate really well in English. I was in ESOL at the time, but for non-ESOL classes, I would just group up with my Korean friends, and I think that's where my identity as Korean American kind of started getting stronger, just
Mm-hmm.
because I had hung out with Korean group of friends more. I do speak Korean, but I'm least comfortable in speaking in Korean,
Oh, really? Okay.
mainly because I have lived in Korea the shortest. Even when we lived in Japan, we had visited relatives there pretty often, summer, winter breaks, but consecutively, I spent the least amount of time
Mm-hmm.
there. So I don't feel comfortable speaking Korean.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel very insecure when I
Okay.
speak and interact with someone, even if it's in the US.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to ask you about your career. Would you mind explaining what you do now and what led to this career choice?
Sure. So I was working full time at a nonprofit organization before, up until last year, but I had started my own event planning and logistics company at the beginning of this year. I kind of dabbled around with it, freelancing in the year before to see if it's something I wanted to pursue. And people who were own their own businesses or is in the similar field has encouraged me to start my own business. I had no plan whatsoever to start something new on my own. So this has been definitely a big leap of faith, so to speak. I'm the type of person who wants to know everything about that new thing I want to challenge myself on, but I just figured that it would be best to just figure things out as I go.
Mhm.
So, yes, I do have managed an event management company called Grace Eventive, established the LLC at the beginning of this year,
Mhm.
mainly catering to Japanese clients based in the DMV region,
Mhm.
because I do have that Japanese language ability, and mainly do corporate, cultural, and corporate events.
Mhm. And could you tell me how you became interested in that field to begin with?
Yes, of course. So for that, at my previous job, I did a lot of program logistics, managing budget,
Mhm.
and also coordinating with various individuals in order to make events happen. And that was one of my strong suits. So I figured if I were to start something new, I wanted to do it in something that I could utilize that.
Mhm.
And event management was something that I could really apply that on. I I'm not good with big crowds, but when it is meeting new people in a smaller scale, I like playing, not matchmaker, that's not the right term, but
Hmm.
it's like so and so has interest in this, and I knew of someone else in my network who's interested in that topic. I like being resourceful to others, so in that sense, I do like getting to know what other people's interests are, so
Hmm.
that um, it can create something new, or you know yeah start like a, what do you call, just help forge a new relationship, so to speak.
That's great. And I also wanted to ask you about a little bit more about when you decided to go solo, because I think it takes a lot of courage and it sometimes can feel a little bit lonely. But you said that there were people in DC who were supportive and
Yeah, it definitely took courage to start this. I hesitated for a long time, honestly. I looked into other directions that I should go, get a different full-time job in a similar field, or get an additional degree, get a shorter contractor job somewhere else. But ultimately, I felt like that was a lateral switch
hmm.
and it wouldn't be beneficial or long lasting,
Hmm.
have an impact in my career. So it took a lot of convincing myself and on talking, consulting other people, Shiori-san, you included, in order to reach a decision and starting my own business.
Hmm.
But I did feel very, yeah, hesitant and lonely in the beginning, but I felt better as I went, and also speaking to more people who had similar experiences, someone who had started their, how they start, hearing from people who own their business, how they started off. And
Hmm.
the more I spoke to them, I realized that a lot of the times they were unsure of what they were doing at the beginning,
Hmm.
or even as they're on a day-to-day basis, as they're, conducting, or just taking care of their business. So that served as an encouragement, I would say.
Hmm.
Yeah, from the network of
Hmm.
people who were nice enough to help me.
That's wonderful. And I think you bring such a unique perspective because I know that the Japan-related community in DC absolutely adores you.
Hmm.
We all enjoy working with you because you're always so not only organized, but you have this really in-depth knowledge of the Japanese culture and mannerisms and customs and whatnot. And I think, yeah, we really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
No, I really mean it. And related to that, I wanted to ask about your other endeavors. Like, I noticed that you're wearing your earrings. Would you mind
Yes,
explaining about those?
thank you. So these are crane earrings that I made from origami paper.
Hmm.
I had started making them when I was in college. That's when the March 11th, 2011, tsunami and earthquake had happened, and I was part of a student organization that was doing just fundraising to help out with the relief effort. And it wasn't my idea, but my fellow classmates' idea was making the crane earrings, selling them, and the proceeds goes to the relief effort. And I wasn't into accessory making before that, but I really got into it. I liked arts and craft from when I was little, especially origami.
Hmm.
So it's been, a while since I was in college, but I still make it to this day, mainly as a hobby,
Hmm.
wearing them out to Japan-related events and
Hmm.
organizations. So I also just recently, this summer, after almost a year of procrastinating, was able to set up like an Etsy store for myself.
Great.
I
Congratulations.
haven't sold anything yet, just mainly because I'm not doing anything to promote the shop, but
Hmm.
it's just for my creative outlet and just as a hobby that I've been doing,
Hmm. Hmm.
crane earrings.
Do you think you might change gears towards that direction? Or do you want to retain event planning as your primary job and then do this on the side?
I would say for right now, yeah, the event planning would be my main gig.
Okay.
And then crane earrings, or I also like handwriting, like hand designed cards, greeting
Hmm.
cards. Mainly I do that for, my own amusement.
Hmm.
So anything on that front would be as a hobby,
Hmm.
including the crane earring.
Hmm. And you also mentioned that you like handwriting cards, but how did you get into typography and that sort of art?
Right. So I like hand lettering,
Mm,
and I guess Western calligraphy, you would say. When did I get into it? Oh, um, if I were to put like a beginning to that journey, I would say it would be in sixth grade when I had calligraphy. Is it calligraphy? Cursive
mm,
exercises that I had to do and submit. I'm not sure if that's part of the curriculum anymore, or maybe they brought it back. But
mm.
I had a lot of fun doing the cursive letters. I used to do Japanese calligraphy as like a class in elementary school. I wasn't very good. But for alphabet,
Mhm,
cursive letters, I really enjoyed doing that.
mhm,
And later on, I found out about hand lettering, which
mhm,
is similar to cursive, except it's more freestyle, I would say, more different fonts and characteristics. And it is drawn in a way that it could look like a logo almost, or a
mhm,
design on a card. So I learned it on my own, just looked up a bunch of designs online, and that's one of the few things that I have was self-learned, I would say.
mhm,
So yeah, hand lettering, cursive, those are, and other kind of drawing little doodles. I really enjoy them.
mhm, mhm. That's really cool. And have you ever explored Korean calligraphy as well, or?
Korean calligraphy, yes. So it's very different in style. I would say Korean calligraphy is more rigid. Again,
Mm,
the extent of my Korean calligraphy skills is just what we did in regular like school class. So which was very few, but I haven't really practiced it that much, but I like the Korean calligraphy. For though I don't For Hangul, the
mhm,
Korean lettering system is very geometric looking,
mm,
right? A lot of
yeah, it's
sticks and
very cool.
circles. Yeah.
Hmm.
So in that sense, it's very uh, satisfying for things when you're writing out in Korean calligraphy that it almost fits in its own grid, so to speak.
Yes, it is very
And
square.
whereas in Japanese, it's more strokes, broad strokes.
Interesting.
But I haven't practiced Korean calligraphy in all more than 20 years, so
Okay.
it would be interesting to re-explore,
Hmm.
but for right now, I think my interest lies more in English cursive and hand lettering with
Hmm.
alphabet more than Japanese or Korean.
Okay, it's really cool. I also wanted to go back to you said you mentioned your identity growing up. So you mentioned that you have an older sister, and
Yes.
um, I, I'm always curious about families with siblings because I'm an only child, and when I was growing up, I didn't have anyone my age that I could talk to about this experience. But I was wondering if you were able to talk about your experience in Korea with your sister and how her identity seems to be similar or different from yours in a way.
Great question. So, my sister and I, as I mentioned earlier, went to public school, and we have a almost 4 year difference
Okay,
between us. And because of that age gap, when she had a harder time assimilating in Korea, I would say. She
I
was
see.
started out with middle school, whereas I was in elementary school.
Hmm.
Or was it high school? I'm pretty sure it was middle school. So it was, in that sense, she had a harder time, and she didn't have a classmate who could interpret for her. I had a
Mm-hmm.
classmate who had lived in Japan, and similar to, but at the time, we were having difficulties with our own difficulties in Korea, but we didn't really talk about it at the time. Only recently, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, was the first time that we had kind of looked back, school in Korea was kind of hard, wasn't it? And we're like, oh yeah, yeah, I remember when this happened,
Mm-hmm.
that happened. And she said like she didn't get along really well with the classmates or had a hard time
Mm-hmm.
with communicating with the teachers. And we had a really big culture shock coming from Japan to Korea, just
Mm-hmm.
because how things were conducted around the classroom,
Mm-hmm.
things as, mundane as like lunch
Mm-hmm.
that's held in class. Lunch was also carried in by a wagon
Oh.
in the Korean classroom, just similar to many public schools in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
But just the culture was so different. In Japan, after everybody served, we sit down and say, "itadakimasu," like,
Mm-hmm.
start eating together.
Mm-hmm.
But in Korea, people get their food, sit down, and start eating right away. And that to me and my sister was a huge shock.
Mm-hmm.
And there were other things about school culture
Mm-hmm.
that was just entirely difficult to adjust to.
I see.
So in that sense, we talked about what or how we assimilated in Korea, but not until recently. And for the when we moved to the US, started out with elementary school again, sixth grade, and my sister in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she hung out more with Korean students, and so did I. But by the time I reached high school, my group of friends were more diverse, I would say, because by
Mm-hmm.
then I was out of ESOL. So I had, friends with different backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, and all. So, and social backgrounds. So, in that sense, I would say I had more like a mix of Korean and American identity by the time I reached high school age. But for my sister, it might have been different because she started out with high school, stuck with the mainly Korean or Asian classmates,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the extent of, high school. So because of our age difference and the
Mm-hmm.
time the grades at which we were in Korea and the US, I feel like my sister, if it's in a spectrum of like more Japanese or more Korean
Mm-hmm.
or American, whatever, she's more leaning towards like the Korean side.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, I told you earlier that I'm least comfortable in Korean.
Mm-hmm.
For my sister, she's least comfortable in Japanese.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's so
if in
interesting.
terms of fluency, I would
Uh-huh.
say, of course, she understands all Japanese that's being spoken to her,
Yeah.
but for output, she's more comfortable in speaking in Korean than
Uh-huh.
Japanese. And I think that's because I had more exposure to Japanese things, or I kept going back
Mm.
to Japanese content more
Mm-hmm.
than she has. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That is so, so, so interesting.
Right.
That it's not
So,
only the years you spent there and the age, but also your experience led to wanting to go back to either physically or to that culture
mhm.
virtually. I think that's so interesting. And I think she teaches taekwondo, right?
Oh, so she and her husband run a Taekwondo martial arts studio. So
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't teach it herself.
Oh,
She does
okay.
mainly the
Sorry.
management side. It's okay. My sister's a teacher at a public high school,
I see. Okay.
math teacher.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. That's
Right.
wonderful. And so, okay. But you said that you're uncomfortable speaking Korean, but speak it at home, right? So when you say uncomfortable, do you mean like honorifics and like formal speak or?
Both. So when I communicate with my family, I speak in English and Japanese.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I
Right.
see.
So
Uh-huh.
right now, to my mom and my sister on a regular basis, I would say it's a mix of Japanese and English when we're speaking.
Oh,
And I would throw
okay.
in Korean names,
Hmm.
phrases in there,
Hmm.
but majority of it is English, Japanese. And the response back from my mom, particularly, would be all Korean.
Hmm.
From my sister, it'll be mainly English, sometimes mix of Japanese and
That
English.
is so
Um,
interesting. Oh my
Another
goodness.
weird thing
Uh-huh.
is I don't know if this is other siblings with similar immigration, you know, what is it? Other siblings who had immigrated to the US later on have the similar experience,
Yeah.
but I feel so awkward speaking to Korean with my sister. We never, almost never speak Korean to each other.
I see.
Yeah, because we grew up speaking Japanese,
Hmm.
and that's part of the reason why I was able to keep up
Hmm.
Japanese to
Hmm.
this point. Uh, right. So the language that I speak, depending on family member, is
Hmm.
different, and it also varies by situation too.
Hmm.
But that's been our interaction as long as I can remember. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. That's really interesting. Could you tell me how and why your family decided to move to the US?
Yes. So we were, as I said before, living in Korea for 1 or 2 years. Um, we immigrated to the US because unfortunately my father has passed away in Korea, and all my relatives on my mom's side were in the Northern Virginia, actually Maryland and Virginia
Oh.
area. So since we didn't have, or my mother didn't have a stable support structure in Korea, and she was a stay-at-home mom, didn't
Hmm.
have a job, no like source of income. So, and because Korea is also notorious for keeping up academic excellence,
Hmm.
also going into, getting into high school and college, you have to have entry exams similar to like just like you do in Japan. But because both me and my sister's academic level, we weren't able to keep up because of the language barrier, or
Oh, I see.
we decided it will be, not we, my mother
Hmm.
decided that it will be, we will have better future academically if we were to move to the US.
Hmm.
So we moved to Northern Virginia in 2002.
Hmm.
And luckily, with the support of my mom's parents, so my grandparents and relatives, we were able to, kind of assimilate to the US culture. It was still hard because we had to practically learn English from scrap,
Hmm.
and get to, again, have to adjust to a new culture again. So being uprooted from what you're just getting used to and then, dropped into another environment has been a challenge.
Hmm.
But luckily, we were still, in our teens, so we're able to adjust relatively quickly. And the presence of a big Korean community was also a plus, I would say,
Hmm.
for all of our family members, including my mom, because um, uh, we could rely on them for resources and
Hmm.
whatnot, and how to get not established, but how to get kind of adjusted to the new life in the
Hmm.
US.
Hmm. That's really interesting. It must have taken a lot of courage to move back to the US by herself, or basically with you guys, but two small daughters. That's really brave of your mom, and I'm so glad she had a strong support system here.
I'm glad to. I can't imagine what it was like for her.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think she was still in her late 30s when my father
Wow.
passed away. So,
Hmm.
yeah, very a lot of burden she had to carry, and I'm forever thankful for my mom. And
Hmm.
to this day, my sister and I sometimes talk about like, oh my gosh, can you imagine,
Yeah.
what our mom had gone through? And yeah, it's been a journey. I
Hmm.
mean, and a big adjustment,
Hmm.
getting used to the US, but I think I feel most at home in this area now than I do
Hmm.
at other places. I would consider
Hmm.
the US to be
Hmm.
my home country, hometown. Although
Hmm.
there's still a lot for me to learn
Hmm. Hmm.
about, yeah.
That's really great. And that's a great segue into what I wanted to ask next, and what your plans are for the upcoming years or decades. So you plan to stay in the DC area?
I would say so, right. I like the area that I'm in, and my family live close by.
Hmm.
So I want to stay in the DC area and also possibly, expand from Japanese clientele from the business perspective,
Hmm.
expand from Japanese clientele to maybe Korean organizations because
Hmm.
there's a lot of Korean demographic in the area.
And if you're comfortable, may I ask you about your boyfriend and if that brings yet another different culture in your everyday life?
Another layer of culture, yes. Yeah, my boyfriend and I have been together for a while, over a decade. So he is Bulgarian American, I
Hmm.
guess I should say, but
Hmm.
he is identified as American for the most part, I think.
Hmm.
He's also immigrated to the US when he was in elementary school, so he knows what it's like
Yeah.
to have a growing up in parents who don't speak English or don't know how it works, things work in the US. So a lot of the times he he also has a brother. He and his sibling had to figure out things on their own or rely on resources other than their parents,
Hmm.
which I relate to a lot because that's how it was for me and my sister as well.
Hmm.
He and I both minored in Japanese in
Oh.
college,
Hmm.
and we both have great interest in Japanese language and culture.
And do you intend to study Bulgarian at some point?
I tried in the past, but I couldn't really keep up with it. I know set phrases, some words.
Hmm.
His mom doesn't speak English at all, aside from a few words.
Hmm.
So I thought about learning Bulgarian so
Hmm.
that I'm able to communicate with her better. But I don't think the language barrier gets in the way of our relationship that
Oh, that's
much.
so
And I
nice.
rely mostly on my boyfriend and his brother if I want to communicate with her when we were having a meal together or
Hmm.
something.
Hmm.
But yeah, maybe Bulgarian, a couple of phrases or words here and there. Um, I want to learn more.
Hmm.
And again, on a daily basis, I ask my boyfriend, like, oh, on our daily walks, how do you say squirrel in Bulgarian, right? Things like that always
That's
comes
so
up.
cute.
He would tell me multiple times, but of course, I don't retain it. So I don't know.
It must be hard because it's a completely different language family from everything else that you know, right?
It is so many consonants back to
Oh, yeah.
back, and I'm not able to really recreate it on my own. So
Hmm.
yeah, the path to mastering Bulgarian is very long, and I may not ever achieve it, but that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. I think so. This will be my last question, but do you have any a message or any advice for people who might be struggling with their identity or growing up or being in a multicultural environment?
Right. So I would say, and this is something that I need to keep practicing as well. So this will be a message slash advice to those who are might having difficulty, and also a message to myself, is really harnessing your difference, like harnessing your multiculturalism or multilingualism.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, even now, there was a point in my life where I thought being multilingual was almost an inhibition because I wasn't able to express my thoughts clearly.
Hmm.
But I realized that I could really turn that around and make it my strong suit. And it wasn't until really later in my life that I had really internalized that. So I would say the same to those who might be struggling with their identity. Kind of internalize your multicultural background, and just use that as your skill set rather than something that you're self-conscious about.
Hmm.
And this might kind of sound cliche, but there's only one of you, like only
Hmm.
one of us. Each of one of us is unique. So if you think about it, there's no right answer in that sense
Yeah.
because every person's different. So there's no need for us to put ourselves against what an ideal, whatever Korean American should be or Japanese American should be. Of course, that's easier said than done, but every time I have identity crisis, I try to come back to that. But I also allow myself to, if I have those insecurities, I let my thoughts, um, I let myself have my thought, but try to rein it in
Hmm.
and bring it back to it's okay to be different. It's okay that you have all these different sides of you because that's ultimately what makes you who you are. So it's personally, that's something that I'm working on and
Hmm.
continue to work on, honestly. But if I were to give an advice, yeah, just embrace your difference and don't try to hold yourself against others or other ideals, expectations.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you so much. You're comfortable with who you are, but you're also very open and honest about how there are some things that you're still working on. And I think that's something that a lot of people need to hear, myself
Hmm.
included. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you see myself as that way. I definitely don't, but it's good to hear that at least, yeah, to others, it doesn't look like I'm spiraling.
Not at all. I think, and it really connects to a lot of the things we talked about, like how you decided to sit on your own, to have your own job, for example. That takes a lot of courage and confidence, and I'm sure that's also played into your identity. But once you do it, it also adds your confidence, and it just becomes better and better. It becomes like a virtuous cycle. I think. And I
Hmm.
think you're doing really well with your business, and yeah, I really am amazed by all that you're accomplishing, but also how always humble you are and always thoughtful and kind. So yeah, thank
Thank you.
thank you so much for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun, and thank you for all your thoughtful questions that you asked.